March 1944. Over the skies of Nazi-occupied Europe, a silver giant emerges from the clouds. Not one, not 10, but hundreds. B-24 Liberators, the most produced American military aircraft in history. Every hour, somewhere over Germany, these bombers are striking back. But here's what almost no one knows. The reason the Allies could flood the skies with these machines wasn't because of the military. It was because of a car company and one assembly line in Michigan that defied every rule of war production. This is the story of Willow Run, the factory that shouldn't have worked, but saved the world. 1940, the world is burning. Hitler's Luftwaffe dominates the skies over Europe. Britain stands alone, battered by relentless bombing. France is fallen. The Soviet Union will soon be invaded. And America? Still neutral, still watching from across the Atlantic. But in the halls of the U.S. War Department, military planners are facing a terrifying reality. If America enters this war, it will need an air force larger than anything ever imagined. The problem is simple and catastrophic. Aircraft production is slow, painfully slow. In 1940, American factories are building bombers one at a time, by hand, like custom furniture. A single B-17 Flying Fortress takes months to complete. Rivets placed by hand. Fuselages assembled piece by piece. It's craftsmanship, but it's not enough. Not nearly enough.
The problem is simple and catastrophic. Aircraft production is slow, painfully slow. In 1940, American factories are building bombers one at a time, by hand, like custom furniture. A single B-17 Flying Fortress takes months to complete. Rivets placed by hand. Fuselage is assembled piece by piece. It's craftsmanship, but it's not enough. Not nearly enough. General Henry Hap Arnold, Chief of the U.S. Air Army Forces, runs the numbers. If war comes, America will need tens of thousands of bombers, but at the current rate of production, it would take decades to build that kind of air armada. The math doesn't work. The timeline doesn't work. And if the math doesn't work, America can't win. Enter one of the most controversial, stubborn, and visionary industrialists of the 20th century, Henry Ford. The man who revolutionized the automobile with the assembly line. The man who made cars affordable for the average American. But also a man deeply opposed to war, an isolationist, a pacifist, at least in name. Ford had famously declared that he would never build weapons of war. He called World War I a rich man's war and spent the 1920s and 30s promoting peace initiatives. But by 1940, the stakes had changed. Nazi Germany was no longer a distant threat. It was an existential one. Roosevelt's administration knew it needed Ford, not just his name, his system, the magic of mass production. The government approached Ford with a challenge. Could the Ford Motor Company apply its assembly line methods to aircraft production? Could they build bombers the way they built cars? Fast, cheap, in massive quantities? Ford was skeptical. So was his right-hand man, Charles Sorensen, Ford's production genius, the architect of the Highland Park assembly line. Sorensen looked at bomber blueprints and saw chaos. Unlike a car, a bomber had no standardized parts. Every manufacturer built them slightly differently. Consolidated Aircraft, the company that designed the B-24 Liberator, assembled them in small batches. It was artisan work. Sorensen's response was blunt. This isn't production. This is sculpture. But Sorensen saw something else too. Potential. If Ford could standardize the process, break the bomber down into subassemblies, coordinate thousands of parts, synchronize the workflow, maybe, just maybe, they could do the impossible. In early 1941, months before Pearl Harbor, Ford Motor Company signed a contract with the U.S. government. The goal, produce consolidated B-24 Liberators, 4-engine heavy bombers, capable of flying deep into enemy territory. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. And to do it, Ford would build a factory unlike anything the world had ever seen.
30 miles west of Detroit in Ypsilanti Township, Michigan, there was nothing but farmland, willow trees, streams, quiet. In January 1941, construction begins. What rises from that farmland will become the largest factory under one roof in the history of the world. Willow Run. The numbers are staggering. The main building stretches 3,500 feet long, more than half a mile. Over 67 acres under one roof. To put that in perspective, you could fit 900 football fields inside. The facility includes its own power plant, its own fire department, and eventually, its own housing for workers. At its peak, Willow Run will employ over 42,000 people working around the clock. But size isn't the only challenge. This isn't just a big factory, it's a new kind of factory. Charles Sorensen and his engineering team designed Willow Run around one concept: continuous flow. The B-24 Liberator will be broken into major subassemblies: wings, fuselage sections, tail assemblies, landing gear, engines. Each component will be built in parallel on dedicated lines. Then, like a car, the pieces will come together on a final assembly line that moves through the entire length of the building. At the end, a finished bomber rolls out the door. In theory. In practice, disaster. The factory opens in September 1941, 3 months before Pearl Harbor. The first B-24 is supposed to roll off the line quickly, proving the concept. Instead, nothing works. The parts don't fit. Consolidated Aircraft's blueprints are inconsistent. Wings built at one end of the factory don't mate properly with fuselages built at the other. Tolerances are off by fractions of an inch. Tiny, but fatal. Riveters can't keep up. Bottlenecks form everywhere. Workers, many of whom have never built anything more complicated than a carburetor, are suddenly expected to assemble 4-engine strategic bombers. The press smells blood. Critics call Willow Run, Willow Slow Run. Journalists write scathing articles about Ford's arrogance, suggesting the company bit off more than it could chew. Some officials in Washington quietly wonder if the whole project should be shut down. And then, December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. America is at war, and Willow Run has to work. 1942.
The pressure is crushing. American forces are fighting in the Pacific and preparing for North Africa. Britain is begging for bombers. The Soviets need supplies flown over the Himalayas. And Willow Run is producing almost nothing. In the first 6 months, the factory completes just one B-24. One. Charles Sorensen doesn't sleep. He walks the factory floor obsessively, watching every bolt, every rivet, every weld. He realizes the problem isn't effort, it's coordination. You can't just scale up bomber production like you scale up car production. A car has maybe 5,000 parts. A B-24 has over 1.5 million, more than 450,000 rivets alone. Every section has to be perfectly synchronized, where the whole line stops. Sorensen makes a decision: redesign everything. He brings in engineers to redraw Consolidated's blueprints with tighter tolerances. He standardizes fasteners, rivets, and fittings across the entire aircraft. He negotiates with suppliers to deliver parts on exact schedules, just-in-time manufacturing, decades before Toyota makes it famous. He even redesigns tools so that less skilled workers can do precision work. And then the workforce. By 1943, Willow Run is hiring anyone who can hold a wrench. The workforce is unlike anything America has seen. Women, lots of them. With most young men overseas, women make up a huge portion of Willow Run's labor force. They rivet fuselages, install hydraulics, wire electrical systems. The iconic image of Rosie the Riveter, the woman in the red bandana flexing her bicep, is directly inspired by women like those working at Willow Run. But it's not just women. African Americans migrate from the South for jobs. Farmhands leave their fields. Teenagers lie about their age to get hired. Many have never seen the inside of a factory.
Ford has to build entire training programs from scratch, teaching people how to read blueprints, use pneumatic tools, work in teams. The housing crisis around Willow Run becomes legendary. Tens of thousands of workers flood into the area, but there's nowhere for them to live. The government eventually builds Bomber City, a sprawling complex of temporary housing. Still, many workers sleep in cars, in boarding houses packed 10 to a room, or commute hours from Detroit. It's chaos. But slowly, it's working. By mid-1943, Willow Run hits a tipping point. The kinks are worked out, the workers are trained, the supply chain is flowing, and the assembly line starts to move.
1 bomber a day, then 2, then 5. By the summer of 1944, Willow Run is producing a B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes, around the clock, 7 days a week. It is, without exaggeration, the greatest feat of mass production in human history. While Willow Run transforms American manufacturing, the B-24 Liberator transforms the war. The Liberator isn't glamorous. It's boxy, industrial. Crews call it the flying boxcar. It doesn't have the sleek elegance of the B-17 Flying Fortress, but it has something better. Range. The B-24 can fly farther, carry more bombs, and reach targets the B-17 can't touch. In Europe, B-24s hammer Germany's industrial heartland, oil refineries, ball bearing plants, rail yards. The 8th Air Force and the 15th Air Force fly daylight bombing raids deep into the Reich, facing murderous flak and swarms of Luftwaffe fighters. The losses are staggering. On some missions, 10% of bombers don't come home. But the ones that do are often from Willow Run. In the Pacific, B-24s island hop across the ocean. They hit Japanese shipping lanes, destroy airfields, and support ground invasions. They fly the longest overwater missions of the war, sometimes 16 hours in the air, crews surviving on coffee and adrenaline. And in the China-Burma-India theater, B-24s fly the hump, the most dangerous supply route in the world, over the Himalayas, delivering fuel and ammunition to Chinese forces fighting the Japanese. Pilots navigate through storms, mountains, and icing conditions that can bring a bomber down in seconds. Many never make it, but the supplies get through, because Willow Run keeps building. By the end of 1944, the Allies own the skies. Not just because of tactics, not just because of bravery, but because of numbers. The Luftwaffe is overwhelmed. For every German fighter that shoots down a bomber, 3 more bombers arrive. Germany's war economy, once thought unstoppable, is strangled by around-the-clock bombing. Factories go silent. Oil supplies dry up. The Wehrmacht can't move. The Panzer divisions run out of fuel. And much of that is because of Willow Run. But victory has a price. The workers at Willow Run work 10, 12, sometimes 16-hour shifts. Industrial accidents are common. The noise inside the factory is deafening. Constant hammering, riveting, engines roaring for testing. Many workers suffer hearing loss. Some lose fingers in machinery. A few lose their lives. And for the women who make up so much of the workforce, there's an unspoken understanding. When the war ends, they'll be expected to give up their jobs, to go home, to return to a world that still sees them as secondary. Many don't want to. They've tasted independence, earned their own paychecks, proven they can do men's work. But the post-war economy has other plans. Still, what they accomplished cannot be erased. By the time production ends in June 1945, Willow Run has built 8,685 B-24 Liberators, more than half of all B-24s produced during the war. The factory also produces parts for B-29 Super Fortresses and even helps develop prototypes for jet engines. But Willow Run's real legacy isn't just the planes. It's the proof. Proof that American industry could mobilize faster and more completely than any nation in history. Proof that mass production could be adapted to weapons of unimaginable complexity. Proof that a diverse workforce, men and women, black and white, immigrants and native-born, could come together and build something extraordinary. President Franklin D. Roosevelt called it the arsenal of democracy. Willow Run was the heart of that arsenal. After the war, the factory is sold. It changes hands several times. For decades, parts of it are used for automotive production. Other sections sit empty, slowly decaying. By the 2000s, much of Willow Run is demolished. But one section remains, preserved as a museum, a testament. Inside, you can still see the original assembly line rails embedded in the concrete floor. You can stand where thousands of workers once stood, building the machines that won the war. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear the roar of engines. Wars are not won by heroes alone. They're won by logistics, by supply chains, by factories that never stop, by people who show up every day even when they're exhausted, even when the work is grueling, because they know it matters. Willow Run is the story of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It's the story of a car company that learned to build bombers. It's the story of a nation that, when faced with existential threat, mobilized every resource, every skill, every person it had. Today, we live in a world shaped by that effort. The defeat of fascism, the rise of American industry, the integration of women into the workforce, the lessons of mass production that still drive modern manufacturing. All of it traces back, in part, to a mile-long factory in Michigan that most people have never heard of. Willow Run didn't just build bombers. It built the future. And that is the untold Willow Run story.